Hey, everybody out there, and welcome to another edition of Privacy Matters with Nick and Steve. I'm your host, Nick, and I'm joined by my co-host here, Steve, and we are excited to get in today's topic. We are going to be talking about Twitter. So obviously, Twitter's been around a long time. There's been a bunch of stuff in the news, and when it comes to data privacy and why your privacy matters, there's a ton to talk about on this topic. So I think over the course of some of our discussions here, we're going to be delving into other social media sites and other websites and things of that nature. But today we are excited to talk about Twitter. And Steve, I'll hand it over to you. You have anything to say before we kick this conversation
Yeah,
off?
great to be with you here, Nick. Excited to be able to talk about Twitter today with you and how it relates to privacy matters. I look at it and it's in the news each and every day right now, not just because it was recently purchased by Elon Musk. It's been in the news for a while, and how they're able to offer a level of influence over the social dynamic. So I know we'll jump into that a little bit later, but there's a lot here to unpack. We'll see what we get done today. Maybe we'll do a second episode on this down the road. But thanks for
Yeah, we
thanks
might
for the
need
time
one.
here.
That's for sure. We might need one. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone's aware of Twitter's history. It started out as like just a simple way to get a message out. From my understanding, I think it was released or launched basically at South by Southwest in that, art and music festival in Texas. And people were basically just posting things like, love cheese pizza. How you doing? This band's excellent. Like very simple 140 character limit, very simple, just messages to get out there. Right. It was like a hello world type of situation. And, and then it grew into this, from my perspective, basically a news media site, right? Like it all of a sudden became a broadcast platform for newscasters, reporters, companies, etc., to broadcast the message out, right? And really became less of that person to person interaction. I don't know about you personally, but I really never used Twitter as a communication tool. Like I was
Yeah,
definitely a Twitter voyeur. Like I would follow certain people and see what they had to say, whether it's like artists or sports or what have you, but I don't I can't say I really tweeted very frequently or much at all even.
yeah. I can count on one hand how many times I've tweeted. I don't have it on my phone anymore, and that's for one. We'll talk about some of those reasons why. But I'll give
Sure.
you an example on your news media stuff. Is we're recording this here on January 13th, just a couple weeks ago. There was a Buffalo Bills player, Damar Hamlin, suffered an incident on the field. And as you're trying to figure out what's going on, it really was Twitter that was the most reliable or up to date information that you could get. Maybe reliable is not the right word, but I found myself gravitating towards Twitter. And the reason for that is there were folks inside the stadium tweeting what they saw or what they had witnessed or how it was unfolding on their timetable, and
Right.
that was more up to date than anything I was seeing on Facebook or ESPN. And Twitter has their app, but you can still look at Twitter on a web browser. And so even though I don't have it downloaded, I was still using it for that news piece that you're describing there. So do I use it every day or how it's intended to be used? Not at all. But when a big event happens, the first thing I go to, whether it's this situation on the football field, when you hear about some type of attack happening or a lone gunman, things like that, I'll look at that on there and see what I can get from Twitter, because I can usually get more information there than anywhere else.
That's an interesting point, and I think that is, if I'm not mistaken, that was where Twitter first made the foray into kind of a live reporting tool, was for that purpose. So, as I mentioned before, it was like talking about your cheese pizza, but then when the Arab Spring happened, that was like the on the ground reporting of what was going on during the Arab Spring, and that was, from my recollection, I think that was the first time Twitter was used in that manner, where it was like you're getting on the ground reports from people who are there, who are experiencing it, and it was not the state media, right? So it was like real news coming in, or quote unquote real news coming in, and and I think all of the CNNs, the Foxes, the MSNBCs, and everyone else said, "Oh shit, this is the platform. Like we need to take our news to this site, and we need to start broadcasting here because this is where the most reliable, or I should say the perception of the most reliable information is coming from, right? And certainly the most up to date. But I think that also leads to another problem of constantly trying to, like if you look at the speed of which news has to be reported nowadays, right? Like if you think back to our good old Walter Cronkite days, you'd have hours and hours for them to prepare and do research and vet stories. And now it's like you got to be at the speed of a tweet, man. You got to be out there, getting it out there as quickly as you're seeing it. Otherwise, somebody else is going to capture that attention from you.
As good as that information is that we're getting some of the time, there's plenty of instances where somebody's just tweeting something out that's completely false, inaccurate, and misleading along the way. But you brought up the Arab Spring, and it triggered something in my mind that I forgot about. But when they had the Bin Laden raid, there's the guy sitting on the ground in Abbottabad in his apartment, and he's tweeting out. He tweets out, "Hey, there's a helicopter coming in. Oh, another helicopter coming in. Something's obviously happening tonight in Abbottabad." And they go through, and he's got like 40 different tweets out there. And about 2 hours later, his tweet was, "Oh shit, did I just tweet the Bin Laden raid?" Right? And it happened in real time. This fully undercover, massive operation conducted by the United States, and this one random guy sitting in an apartment in Abbottabad is tweeting out about it, and we didn't know it. Nobody knew it at the time that was happening publicly, but that's the power of Twitter that we're talking about. But for those examples, where they are accurate, where it is informative and helpful, I think unfortunately the other end of that is far more egregious. We could go on right now and type in anything that we want to hear. We could type in XYZ happening at this location, or Celtic, for me, the Red Sox win the World Series. We can type that in, and we're going to see tweets about them winning the World Series this year, or that they've already won it, something like that, right? This
right.
This idea that you can find the message that you want to get, and I think that's what comes down to one of their biggest challenges right now, and at least something that we've seen their new owner talk about how he wants to clean that up and look to get a little more accuracy in that reporting.
Yeah, so I think when you speak to the accuracy, it was interesting to see the evolution, right? So coming into the primarily a news media outlet where reporters and like we talked about, all the news channels were using that as a medium to get things out to the public, and you could follow and you could put in your hashtag and follow your topics that you're interested in. And then as we got into the world of COVID and some of these other things and January 6th and the Trump era of, the political back and forth, we started to see an ideology take over at Twitter, right? I think to some extent, and really that's not unique just to Twitter, but we started to see some censorship. We started to see some people who were maybe speaking a different narrative than what the company valued or what the quote unquote official narrative should be. And then they started removing people. And, you talk about Elon stepping in, and I think that was a big part of what Elon was trying to do, was to come in and, try to honor what he felt should be free speech. Whether or not he's going to achieve that, I think remains to be seen, or whether or not he's even be able to take this company and make it profitable, I think remains to be seen. But I did think it was pretty interesting that in this latest claim and this latest release of files to some independent journalists, Matt Taibbi being one of them, where they talked about not only claims of censorship, we'll see if that pans out, but claims that the FBI was paying Twitter, or at least had a tab with Twitter, upwards of millions of dollars to search, get records of communications on individuals that were using Twitter, and then the claim again is that they also were paying them to censor certain individuals. So I think it'll be really interesting to see now that the kimono's been lifted, where this all goes. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I don't think you and I are going to dive into whether or not how factual or truthful that FBI claim is, at least today. But I think the former comment that you make is really tough at this point to not dispute the fact that there was a level of control within Twitter of how certain messaging was generated, shared, emphasized. And when I say emphasized, how was that prioritized to the folks using Twitter? How was that embedded in their feed so that they saw that more frequently than others, right? I don't think anybody disputes that. The other thing, I'll come back to that point here, but the other thing to talk about here is, there's a number that we're going to talk about in a minute of how many users are on Twitter. Well, how many are users and how many are bots? And I know we're going to chat about that, but that plays into that conversation of what is behind that misinformation that's clearly being exposed now on a daily basis. So do I think that the FBI is involved in that or not? I'm not sure I have a thought on that at this point, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. It's not impossible, but I think for now, I'd rather stick with the fact that we know definitively that certain things are being emphasized and impressioned more than others. And when you are controlling that narrative of 330 plus million users that you list, then you can have a significant impact on the dialogue being spoken about a topic, or the feeling on a topic, or how that topic resonates, or, even worse, how that topic is perceived to be of high opinion or high matter. And what I mean by that is, the more people see and hear about it, oh, that means more to the populace right now because I'm seeing it over and over again. They're able to turn issues and concerns, topics. They are able to give them credibility or power that may not otherwise have been had.
I think that's the perfect word, the credibility, right? So, like, if we talk about another thing that Elon's trying to revise or revamp, there is the blue check mark, right? So, are you a quote unquote certified, creditable source?
Right.
And Twitter, for the longest time, wielded that authority with impunity, right? And like, if they didn't want to give you your little blue check mark, so where people from the outside would say, okay, this person has been through some kind of vetting process. We never knew what that vetting process was, but there was some type of vetting process to determine you are who you say you are. You have a record of whatever.
Can you make me money as Twitter? That's the vetting process.
Well, that's really what. Yeah, you're right. That's probably what it boiled down to. But they would hand out that check mark, right? And if you didn't have your check mark, that maybe indicated that it was less reliable. So, I think that was certainly something that they controlled. And just on the FBI comment, I don't mean to speculate or to imply anything, but you and I both know from our previous work that there's a lot of legitimate reasons why the FBI would be contacting any social media site to be getting some records, right? Because just like there's millions of good people with good intentions on there, there's also bad actors in all these spaces. And for the protection of the nation and other reasons, the FBI and other companies are going to, or other organizations are going to be reaching out to those people to work hand in hand with them. Law enforcement.
I'm glad you got your law degree.
Because crimes are committed on Twitter, right? Crimes are committed on Nextdoor. They're committed on Twitter. They're committed on Let Go and all these other places. So there is a legitimate law enforcement reason for them to be working with them.
Yeah, I'm glad you got your law degree and covered down on that disclaimer there. With that regard. For me personally, I grew up in the Boston area, right? So there's never this high level of trust with the organization, regardless of all the good things that they do accomplish, like you highlight there. But So, for us, it is one of those things. Is it impossible that everything that we're hearing is happening? Of course not. It's not impossible, but
Right.
we'll be interested to see how that one plays out more and more in the future here.
Yeah. I love conspiracies, but I also try to look at them with a skeptical mind, right? I love a good conspiracy and I love to dig into it and, play it out and see how the chips fall. But I definitely don't jump in with both feet until I know what's going on. So
Yeah, let's do
that's
that.
kind of my take.
We'll have an episode in the future on conspiracy theories. I think that'll be our 3 hour one. We'll be good to go.
Sounds fun.
So Nick, talk to me about this shift over to the bots a little bit. For those that don't know, the bots are essentially computerized, made up users that exist on all these platforms, not just Twitter. But on Twitter, it's pretty interesting because this purchase took place with the understanding of um, how many individuals and users existed on that platform. And now what we're finding out post deal gone down with Elon is that um, there's a certain number of bots that exist on that platform. And the last thing I read recently is that it's about 15%, right? There's not this definitive answer of there's 1,000 bots, we're good to go. They're estimating about 15% of the users that Twitter said they had are bots. And so from that perspective, uh, bots can be harmless, but I'm of that opinion of bots have one thing to do and one thing to do only, and that is to strengthen the message of some other narrative that's on there. They're not there to increase the number of users. Twitter has 335 million users. They didn't need, that extra 33. If you're doing 10% of that extra 33 didn't get the job, didn't get the deal done with Elon. So why are those bots there? They're to emphasize this message that's going out. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that or if you disagree with me there.
No, I do. So I think a couple things on that. So one, um, you know, Elon paid some ungodly amount for the company. I think it was $44 billion or something. And we all know he tried to pull out of the deal, right? So why did he try to pull out the deal? From I think his initial tweet was something like 20%, 15-20% of of Twitter was bots, and then his legal team actually came out at one point and said something like 33% of Twitter was bots. That's a third of the users. I mean, that's an insane number, right? If you're like thinking about it in those terms, and we're not talking about small numbers. These are it's a billion users or however many people are on Twitter. I mean, it's like these are insane amounts of people or supposed users that are bots, and whatever that number falls in, I mean, it's definitely. I think there's no question that it's going to be more than the under 5% claim that Twitter made going into this, right? So, what is that? You talked about what bots are. Bots are, obviously, not necessarily fake accounts, but they're computerized accounts. Someone's behind them, creating them, um, you know, maybe directing content and retweeting and things of that nature. And so there's a lot of like businesses that use bots to promote content. There's a lot of like pretty innocuous reasons to create a bot, but then there's also the other reasons, right? Like the reasons to get a message across or to um, incite something or to spread a narrative, right, and make something go viral. So
Let's bring that back to
overall, I
the
think
topic, though. Bring
yeah, go
that
ahead.
back to the topic of privacy matters, right? Which is what we're here. We've kind of laid the groundwork of what Twitter is. We've laid the groundwork of some of the questionable things that we've heard and we're starting to see out there. And then we've laid the groundwork of, hey, it's not all 330 plus million innocent individuals across the globe just using it to say, like you said, I got a cheese pizza tonight or things like that. So
Right.
when we do that, when we take all those things into account and we bring it back to the heart of our podcast here, I think you're touching on the fact that number one, information can be disseminated to you intentionally, methodically, deliberately, and nefariously to try and influence who you are and what you're believing in and what your opinion is on things, right? That's
Sure.
number one. I think number two is that they can take your data that you're sharing on Twitter and give it a level of credibility, or give it an exponential component to it, meaning it's not just that Nick said he has a large cheese pizza. Now that tweet has somehow been regurgitated by 40 or 50 other people, even though it was only sent once, but it gives an emphasis and level of power there that wasn't there before. We're talking pizza, but when you get into more serious issues, now look at it. And then the third thing I would say is, as you do that, and as you bring that information together, then what information do you block or restrain? So, yes, privacy, is that getting into your privacy? It's getting into your privacy in that you're not seeing the whole story, potentially, and you're not seeing that intentionally.
It's as you're describing that, it made me think of um, cancel culture as a concept, but just it could be any topic in general. But it makes me think that how much more gravitas does a topic get and obtain along the way, because it seems like there's that much more attention around it. And if all these bots do is they're basically trained to follow a trending thing and get some attention to interject along that path, right? Because it's just meant to drive up the conversation. So you could have that be trained for anything. And if it's following a news cycle and it's following things that are going viral, which they would, I mean, that's the intention of bots, it's going to seem like there's exponentially more people interested in a topic, caring about a topic, and getting fueled and upset by a topic than there really are, right? So, I mean, if it's 33%, it's probably not, but if it was, that would be a third of Twitter who's getting upset about a topic that they're not even real, right? There's
Right.
imaginary people. So you kind of have to like put it into perspective, I think, when you look at what is really going on with the conversation and how much do I really need to care about this? Are there this many people really upset about X, Y, and Z, or are they literally just Chat GPT fueled uh, computer programs that are upset about this, right?
Yeah,
Which is a
it's
pretty amazing tool.
yeah. So that dives into, what's the truth behind all this, and we mentioned that that's something that Elon wants to focus on with the blue check mark. And people that say that there's a little conspiracy and there's a lack of truth, or that would dispute some of the things that you and I are talking about with regard to the influence of the just that they even exist. Forget what they're able to do, just that they actually exist. The other side of that coin is going to say, well, Elon's going to do the same thing, but just from a different political perspective, or a different viewpoint. Uh, to be seen, right? Like we don't know that
Yeah,
yet.
sure.
All we know is that he brought a sink into headquarters on day one and carried that up to the main office. And what we've seen is that, and we've seen that certain folks had their accounts restored, but we've also heard the dialogue of how are we going to validate trust on here. So to be determined on that. But I know the other side of the coin is going to say, well, we're going to have the same thing. It's just going to be different topics and different viewpoints that are emphasized now. Uh, and so I think that brings it back to the major point here, which is you and I aren't the judge and jury of Twitter as much as to highlight the fact that this is a platform that it's pretty obvious whoever is in charge is going to consistently have challenges associated with trust and validation, and how our data, if you are a user on the platform, is used for us or against us.
No question. Yeah, no question. You know, that it's an interesting challenge, I think, that people are seeing. So just as an, whether you're an individual or whether you're a business or what have you, you have a, when you have an expectation that when you use these services like Twitter, that you'll be able to bring your candid self to that platform and have an open conversation. And as you do that, you'll be able to gain a following, an audience, and speak to people who share your values or have a similar experience in life, right? So what we're finding, what we found previously with the previous Twitter kind of administration was that if they didn't share your value, then they would boot you, right? And then what happens to your audience that you cultivated? I mean, that's a lot of time, money, and effort put in by companies, by individuals, by content creators to build a brand and build an audience, and you're completely at the mercy of a corporation, and you're also completely at the mercy of a host of what we now find are automated bots also there to either prop you up or tear you down, right? So, it's really, when it comes to the privacy and the security aspect of it, it's a wild west. And that's where we need, like we've talked about this in the past, that's where we need platforms where, whether you're a content creator, whether you're a business, you can build a community around your brand where you own the data, you own the information, and you know that the security of that community is something that you have oversight and ownership of, and you
And
don't
why
have
are
to
those
worry about somebody shutting you down.
and why are those pretty much non-existent today? Because they don't make as much money as these other platforms can by manipulating your own data or manipulating the level of trust within them, right? Like if trust was profitable, everything you just described would be there, readily available on the market today. Everybody'd be using it. But trust isn't the most marketable. It's how can I get the most information out there regardless of its truth? How can I manipulate the data coming into me from people to get a dime here or a dime there, and those dimes add up to millions, add up to billions of dollars. And that's why we don't have it. It's because it is not the most profitable solution out there.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I do think though that that's being a little short-sighted, right? Like you have to look at the overall broader business risk, and it's cheaper as long as it's working for you. But as soon as they decide to flip the switch on your account, now you've lost it all, right?
Right.
So is that a risk that any business should be taking, right? Like that is a pretty big risk. Or you have to get into this game that everyone's playing now where it's one upping each other on whatever the social narrative that's been deemed appropriate is, and everyone has to basically parrot the same thing in order to not be removed from their platform and lose that following, where
Yeah,
which
saying
also doesn't
saying
put
nothing
companies into a good position, right?
saying nothing is just as volatile as going against that narrative, right? It's
Sure.
almost today that, oh, we have this social media, it only takes you 10 seconds to tweet. Everybody should say something. I mean, um, you're a veteran of the United States, and I know on Veterans Day, every single company organization out there puts out a tweet, and I'm sure it is 99% genuine. I'm not questioning that as much as to say there's also this level of expectancy that exists there now that if you don't put it out there, well, then obviously you hate veterans and you hate the United States. So everybody has to do this. Everybody has to. It's become so demanding that that's part of the cycle that we go through. But I think
Right.
as it relates to Twitter, we haven't done recommendations on the podcast before, but the recommendation I have is to think about it. To your point, is it worth it for you? And for many right now, it probably is worth it for them and their company to take that risk on. The other recommendation that I would have here is, to take a look at that approach that I referenced a little earlier. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't need one anymore. Don't want one, given what we know. But I still check in on Twitter through a web browser to get updates on things that may be happening, current events breaking or whatnot in real time, to get just to look for information. It's up to me to determine what I want to do with that information. But I think that with Twitter and any other platform that we talk about on this podcast, it really needs to be one of those things where people assess the risk. And I know for most of them, at this point in time, they're going to accept that risk because they don't want to miss out. It's the FOMO, right? They don't want to miss out on their friends are on Twitter, their friends are tweeting. I didn't get to see the tweet.
Well, and like we said earlier, I mean, it still is a phenomenal method of getting on the ground, real time news updates, whether it's sports or, current events, what have you. Like, it is still going to be a tool that's used for that purpose. And I think that's why it's so important that we not only have these conversations and talk about some of the risks using them, or maybe some things that everyone should be aware of when they use them. But it's a tool like any other tool. It just don't tie all of your everything to that one that one horse, because it's,
don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Sure. Pick your analogy.
Analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything else you have to say here before we wrap things up? We're right about 30 minutes.
No, I'm pretty excited. I'm glad we could talk about this today. I think we'll probably have another chat on Twitter down the road, especially as more news comes out on this and what influence other organizations may have had on them, to be determined. But I don't think this is the end of the discussion on Twitter for our podcast. But appreciate the time today, Nick.
Yeah, likewise, Steve. And I can't agree more. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.